Good morning, welcome back and all the things. Today I'm going to do an experiment. So online, as we often do, conversations come up, and one of the ones that often come up is about, is it cheaper to make your own from scratch or to buy it pre-made? So this was the conversation, and I like my example of bread because I can make a loaf of bread for $1, maybe $1.50 if I was buying everything at the store, as opposed to buying the same amount by weight pre-made. It would cost me about $7. So I mentioned this to a lady over in UK, and she said that flour is quite expensive over there, especially, she said, if you want the proper bread flour. Because I always use just all-purpose flour. So I'm going to do an experiment and see if there is really any difference between the two. So in this pail I have just all-purpose flour. It's your basic all-purpose flour. And right here I bought a small bag of bread flour. It says Robin Hood Best for Bread Flour, own style white. I only have 6 bread pans, so I have to split my normal recipe in half. Do half with all-purpose and half with bread flour. I have 2 plastic bowls approximately the same size. They're different shapes, so that's a little bit, I would rather add 2 exact, but this will do. The eggs, I took those out of the fridge so they're not quite room temperature. Ideally you would have your eggs at room temperature. Sea salt that I collected from across the road. This is traditional dry yeast, active dry yeast. And the regular granulated white sugar. Some kind of edible oil. For basic bread you would want a flavorless oil, so vegetable, canola. Olive oil in my opinion has a taste, but something that's not going to give your bread a more of a taste. If however you like that taste on bread, then it doesn't matter. So what we'll do, we'll start by putting in all our dry ingredients. So my recipe calls for 12 cups. Now I put 6 all-purpose flour in there. Six bread flour in there. Let's see, I don't know if it's going to show up on the camera or not, but there is a slight difference in the color. The bread, well, the all-purpose flour is practically pure white. The bread flour has this kind of a tan tint to it. I don't know if that's just the brand or is that the difference between all-purpose flour and bread flour. Now, this is not an exact science. When I do the full batch, I put a heaping handful of salt in each one. So I'll put a small handful, about a half a handful in each one today. Everything the same except for, of course, the type of flour. As far as sugar goes, an half cup measure, because I put 1 cupful in before, so we'll put a half a cupful in each one today. I couldn't lay eyes on my full tablespoon measuring spoon, so I got a half a tablespoon here. 1 tablespoon in each of these bowls. Make sure I got all the yeast wiped out of there because I want to use it. Put 1 tablespoon of sugar in each bowl. This is warm water, not hot. I'm going to put some in this one. I'm going to do that this way. This is the only spot where it is a little bit time difference. I'll let that proof while I put 1 egg in here and half a cup of cooking oil. Most people doing this will use either margarine or butter, but if you're using margarine, I figure what's the difference? What difference if the form your oil comes in, right? Margarine is basically flavored cooking oil. Now I go that far and I mix this in around until it's all dry and kind of a grainy texture because I've put in a little bit of liquid. So this is what I'm going to do now while I'm waiting for that yeast proof. When you're making bread, everything should be at least room temperature. I forgot to take out the eggs, that's why they're not room temperature. Also, the air should be fairly warm. I run the house usually about 17, 18 degrees, and it takes so long for the bread to rise up. But now I've got the fire in. I did get up midnight last night to make sure the house stayed warm, so that it's fairly warm here. Actually, I'll check the temperature over right here. The temperature by the kitchen wall is actually still showing 18 degrees, so let's set it here and we'll see what the temperature is right here at the place I'm making the bread. This is all mixed now. I'm just playing with it more while I'm waiting for that yeast to proof a little bit. Okay. I'm going to put the yeast in there. This is whey powder. Not whey powder, liquid whey. Some time ago I bought a bunch of markdown milk and I made cheese and whey out of it, and I bottled the whey. It was sitting in the pantry, so it's room temperature. It would be better if it was slightly warm like the water that I put in here, but room temperature will do. I put it in this jug because this jug almost full is what I usually used with the full pack, so I need to put half of this in this one side now. There, that's half. Kind of thinking I had too much in there, but it doesn't matter. We'll just make extra bread, that's all. It's going to be the same for both, right? The thing is, you need to get it wet enough to ensure that the flour is soaked all the way through. You can always add flour afterwards, but if you don't get it soaked all the way through, then you'll end up with dry lumps of flour in your finished product. See, that was 2 more, so now that's 8, right? So now that's 9. the rest of the dough off my hand. This is my bread mixer. Not the mechanical jobbies that people use. Maybe I'll mix in the last little bit so I can say I used 10. Just gonna put that there like that. And put my normal bread sheet over it. Now, to tell the difference between what the time is, just a sec. It's 10:49. I'm going to start this yeast proofing. I'll give you a close-up of this one, the process. So this is the first little bit, just to make sure the oil and egg is mixed all in through the flour, right? Looks like the temperature here is only 18 degrees Celsius. And I'm sweating a little bit at that. See, a little too much, but we have to do it exact now because I had to put too much in the first one. I had to put exactly the same amount in the second one, right? Otherwise, the experiment is not proper. It should be at this point going doughy, but not real dough, like a really sticky sludge. So that was 7. But like I said, better to start with it too wet than too dry. Okay, so I'm finding the bread flour different already. There's 9. That was 10. So to get it down to the right consistency to start with, you have to use more flour. That was 11. Now it's down to that consistency, this last one. Will probably finish it off. Oh yeah, this is a really much finer texture, and you can feel it. Now when I do this, I sprinkle the bottom of the bowl as well. This is helping it pull away from the bowl once it gets a little drier. I think I'm going to borrow some bread pans, but then I don't know if that will work. The reason being I can only put 6 in the oven at one time. Last one in, so I can say put in 12. But look at this. Can't get 12 in there. That's the difference with the dough. It just went so far and then I said, no, forget it. I'm not taking any more. I'm going to put this towel over that. It's 11:04, so that's 15 minutes. It took me to mix up the second one. 15 minutes difference on the rising time when we check it together as one. Okay, it's been a little over 4 hours. I didn't need to leave it that long, but is what it is. This is the all-purpose flour. And that is the bread flour. Even at that, this feels a little stickier than the surface of this. The bowls are, like I said, approximately the same size. They're a little different shape. There's a cup and a half more flour in this, but as you can probably see, it is risen up quite a bit more than this one. So another point in favor of the bread flour. I've got metal clips put on these three so that we can tell the difference between going to put the dough made from all-purpose flour in there and the dough made from bread flour in those three. Could have probably done this an hour ago, actually. Now you're going to need a little bit of flour put on it just so it's not sticking to your hands. And I make 3 buns when I do it. You'll get used to feeling how much is the right amount once you've made a few batches. So we're just coating it in flour so that, like I said, it's easy to roll it in on itself to make that bun like that, and it's not sticking to your hands and to everything else. Scrape it away from the sides as you go. Now, I'm going to put that back. It's going to be rising up there, and I'm going to have to punch it down again to make another batch after we get these baked. Now let's see what happens. And to take the flour out of the bag, of course, and put it in. See, this is really soft. Ooh, that's way too much. Maybe not. And this is really soft flour. Total different feel altogether. It's pulling away from the sides of the bowl better, but that blue bowl, it was scratched up, so I'm not sure if it's to do with the flour or is it just the bowl, that this bowl has smoother sides. Okay. I'll put that back. Should be. Oh. I need to do something, so I gotta take that off of there. I'm going to have to stretch that towel over both of those now. I think I got them pretty much all same, equal. I need to cover them up, and like I said, because this is a smaller area and all, the rising in the pans, the bread pans portion, always takes less time than the initial rising in the mixing bowl. I think I want to pull this all the way back. I want to let them rise a bit more, but putting them in the pans there, they don't seem to be much difference between one and the other. These I might have had a little less in there, I don't know. But yeah, they seem to be rising about the same rate in the metal pans. The reason I'm turning the camera on now is because I want to make some toutons for supper. And you see the bread dough one is rising much faster than this one here, which is made with the all-purpose flour. So I've cooked two. This is with the bread dough and that's with the all-purpose flour. That's 2 toutons. See how they come apart? So this one, you see the 2 layers, they come apart a little differently, but not much difference. As far as toutons goes, I think it's, well, for bacon so far, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I'm going to put garlic escape pesto on this and cheese, and that's going to be my supper now. Okay, so we're going to put them in the oven. I don't think you can tell on the screen, but there is a color difference. There's still a yellowish sheen on the bread flour loaves, as opposed to these here are just tan color. I've got the oven preheated. I do mine on 320. That is something that you'll have to test with your own oven. There's various factors of humidity and air pressure and the oven and a bunch of different things that will dictate how these actually bake. Now, I'm not sure how long it's going to take. I'm going to check them in about half an hour. Wow, that's some beautiful looking bread. I got them separated because that's the bread with the bread flour, and that's the bread with the all-purpose flour. It's still hot, so I'm going to wait a bit to cook it. You can see it's a little crusty. Now, I leave it like that. You know what? I'm not going to leave it like that. People like to, they melt butter or margarine on top so that that's not so crusty. Once again, like I said, what difference does it make what form your oil is in if you're going to melt margarine on there? So I'm just going to put a bit of oil on top. And we'll see if that softens up that little bit of crustiness. See, right away it's different. And when it cools, then we'll cut it and see what it's like on the inside. It's all baked and cooled now. I've got this space here because this is the bread with the all-purpose flour. This is the bread with the bread flour. And then that little one down there is I had a little bit of dough left from each one. So I put it in a pan. One bun is all-purpose flour and the other bun is bread flour, but I don't know which is which. So, right now, we're going to look at taking 2 that's about the same size and looks fairly about the same. Those 2 there. This is the bread flour. Let's cut it and see what it's like. it awful thin, didn't I? But that's okay because I'm going to have to eat that now, and I just had breakfast. Very soft and bouncy. I'm going to take this one. Still again, I don't know if you can see it on the screen or not. But this, the all-purpose flour, is a lighter color than the bread flour. The all-purpose flour seems to be a little bit heavier, but not much. And as for the texture difference, I think there is a little bit of finer texture in the bread flour. Now if you were to cut the loaf, see, this is the all-purpose loaf here. And this is the bread flour loaf. So from there, not much of a difference in looks, is it? Telling you all the differences in this. If I were to tear that, this is one of the reasons why I cut them about the same thickness. I can feel the difference in the all-purpose flour is a slight bit harder to tear, it seems. See, that comes apart, in my opinion, much easier than the all-purpose flour does. When I was mixing up the dough, actually when I was putting the dough in the bread pans, I noticed that the dough seemed to be a little more elastic with the bread flour. That's because it has higher gluten content, and it seemed to be lighter. If I were to redo this experiment, because the flour seemed to be finer, a cup of bread flour will probably weigh more than a cup of all-purpose flour. So if I were to redo the experiment, I would weigh out the flour instead of measuring out the flour, and have equal weights. Now the other thing, taking two loaves that look to be about the same size, and see how heavy they are. 564 grams for the bread flour. 572 grams for the all-purpose flour, so about the same. So here's my final analysis on that test. I bought 2.5 kg of Robin Hood bread flour. That was $7. I used about 3/4 of it, so $5.25. And I had almost 5.5 loaves, so about $1 worth of flour. With the all-purpose flour, if I was buying Robin Hood, then it would have cost me $6. So about $4.25, 3/4 of it, right? And I got 4.5 loaves. So the price difference is a little bit less with the all-purpose flour, but not much. Now, however, If you go with no name brand, you can get and buy 10 kg bags, you can get the flour for half that price. So 50 cents a loaf for flour. Then you add in the other ones, the egg, salt, sugar, and yeast. And per loaf, you're adding about another 25 cents. So if you go with the Robin Hood brand of flour, you're talking $1.25 per loaf. If you go with all-purpose, buying in bulk, you're talking 75 cents per loaf. You can buy Robin Hood in bulk as well, but it will still cost you more. It'll cost you about $1 a loaf. At same weight, 570 grams loaf of bread in the store costs $4. So 4 times the price of getting it. Now, as for whether you want to do bread flour, if you're in the place, like for me, I have to either get someone to get it or find a way to get to the bigger center. There's no bread flour for sale at the closest decent sized town here. I'd have to go a hour away to actually get it, so it's pointless for me to be trying to make stuff with bread flour. But if you're in a center where bread flour was readily available and you're buying the same brand, then the bread flour has a finer texture. You might like that, and it rises much better. So you might like that. That's the only 2 reasons that I think would be the reason you would go with bread flour over all-purpose flour. But on the other hand, like I said, if you're not brand loyal, then you could probably get the all-purpose flour much cheaper than the bread flour. That's the experiment. Hope you found it interesting. And I'll see you back in the next video.